Every clue points to a mysterious vigilante, someone who silently punishes the wicked who escape the law. They are a ghost, a myth. But what if the ghost has a name, a face? And what if that face belongs to the very person who taught Alex about justice, about right and wrong, and about how to hide a murder? I'm Clyde. Uncover the unthinkable twist on the best mystery book podcast.
Chapter 43. Washington, D.C., Friday, April 28, 2023, 4:05 p.m. Alex hurried across the campus of McCormack University. Heading toward the School of Journalism, she noticed two news vans parked outside the main entrance, with crews pulling cords and preparing to shoot live reports for the evening news. Larry Chadwick's press conference the week before had summoned the D.C. press to McCormack University. But Laura McAllister's disappearance had opened the floodgates to the national media. McCormack University and the surrounding area were teeming with reporters, and it was sure to get worse the longer the girl was missing. As Alex walked and watched the action, the crews and reporters and vans and cameras all brought back images from that fateful night a decade earlier, when Donna had led her out of her home into the hot lights of similar news crews. A bitter taste of bile crept into her throat. The only thing that could be deemed juicier to the press than a young girl gone missing would be uncovering that a woman formerly accused of killing her family was looking into the case. Alex had a sudden urge to get as far away from the cameras and news crews as possible. While she looked toward the commotion outside the gates of McCormack University, where reporters scrambled for the best location to deliver their reports, she collided with someone on the sidewalk. "Oh God, I'm sorry," Alex said, gaining her bearings and realizing she had walked into a woman who was holding a microphone and delivering her own report. The cameraman lowered his camera from his shoulder and waved a hand in disgust. "Cut," he said. "Gonna have to do that all over." Alex looked at the cameraman. The fact that the reporter would have to reshoot the segment meant, at least, that they weren't live on the air. Alex looked back to the reporter. Really?" She tried to finish her apology, but the words caught in her throat. It felt as if her trachea had narrowed, and no matter how hard she tried to speak, no words would come. It took only a moment for Alex to understand why her body was shutting down. She was staring at Tracy Carr, the reporter who had stuck the microphone in her face 10 years earlier, when Alex walked out of her house the night her family was killed. She was standing face to face with the reporter who had stalked her for a decade, and who had earned a substantial following by offering anniversary updates on the whereabouts of Alexandra Quinlan. This was the woman, Alex knew, who had coined the nickname Empty Eyes, and here she was, staring straight at her. "Sorry," Alex finally managed. "I wasn't paying attention." Alex averted her gaze, breaking eye contact for fear that, despite the years since their last encounter and Alex's physical transformation, Tracy Carr had recognized her. Alex offered no time for the woman to piece things together, quickly walking away with the sinking realization that the entire encounter, however brief, had been captured by the news camera. And if Tracy Carr suspected who had ruined her report, the woman had the digital evidence to review and confirm it. As Alex hurried away, she snuck a glance over her shoulder as she was about to turn the corner of the journalism building. Tracy Carr continued to watch her, and they locked eyes for just a moment before Alex disappeared behind the bricks. Alex spent time wandering the halls of McCormack University's School of Journalism looking for the recording studio and trying to calm her nerves. As her heart raced and her head swam with dizziness, she spotted a restroom and pushed through the door. After staggering to the sink, she splashed cold water on her face. When she looked up and into the mirror, for an instant she saw Alexandra Quinlan staring back. That teenaged girl still existed in her mind, but to actually see her in the mirror was something new and startling. The image of Alex Armstrong, with the spiked blonde hair, piercings, tattoos, and wild shades of lipstick, had for years supplanted the image of her old self. To the point, at least, that when she looked into a mirror, she never thought of the girl she used to be. Until now. Until moments after she'd come face to face with the reporter who had shattered her life. Alex blinked a few times until Alexandra Quinlan disappeared. She realized, though, that no matter how easily her mind displaced the old image of herself, it would take something much greater to prevent Tracy Carr from piecing things together. To a casual observer with no or little memory of Alexandra Quinlan, glancing at Alex today was nothing more than looking at a stranger. But to the woman who had obsessed over empty eyes for a decade, staring to Alex's eyes was sure to trigger recognition. She spent another few minutes calming her nerves and finally exited the washroom to wander the empty halls until she found the recording studio. It was located on the second floor of the Westcott School of Journalism building, and just as Ashley Holmes promised, the door was locked when Alex tried the handle. A window was etched in the wall and the recording studio was dark inside. Alex waited in the hallway to gauge the level of foot traffic. After 5 minutes, no students or faculty materialized. Alex removed her pick set and made fast work of the studio's door lock, despite her hands still carrying a slight tremor from her run-in with Tracy Carr. Inside, she contemplated whether she should turn on the lights or work in the dark, but decided that being spotted in the studio with the lights off would be more suspicious than sitting at the dashboard with the studio fully lighted. Overhead fluorescents brought the studio to life, and Alex immediately recognized the space from her previous night's viewing of Laura McAllister's appearance on Wake Up America. It was hard to believe stories produced in such a small studio reached so many listeners. 10 minutes after she clicked on the lights, she had still not seen anyone walk past the studio. She went to work at the recording studio's computer, taking a few minutes to bypass rudimentary firewalls until she was into the hard drive's saved documents. The files were titled by students' names and ID numbers. Alex scrolled until she located Laura McAllister's last saved document, which was dated April 21, the previous Friday, which represented the last time anyone had seen or heard from her. The document was an MPG-4 audio file. Alex took a quick look through the window. The hallway was quiet and still. She removed a thumb drive from her rucksack, inserted it in the USB drive, and copied the file. The large file took 15 minutes to transfer. Alex spent the time sitting at the studio's table acting casual for anyone who passed by the window. No one did. When the transfer was complete, she removed the thumb drive, locked the recording studio on her way out, and was overly cautious when she exited the building. Seeing no reporters or news crews, she headed home to listen to Laura McAllister's episode. Chapter 44. Washington, D.C., Saturday, April 29th, 2023, 7:15 a.m. Early Saturday morning, just over a week since Laura McAllister had last been seen, and while the campus was still asleep, Professor Martin Crosby finished lecture notes for the upcoming week, answered a few emails, and then changed in the faculty washroom. He emerged in running shorts and gym shoes. It had been his New Year's resolution to get into shape, and 4 months of his ritual of putting in an hour of work each Saturday morning before tackling a 3-mile run had prevented him from losing the gains he'd made during the week. He'd managed to lose 15 pounds since the new year and had kept it off. He had even started to enjoy running. He exited the Reiner faculty building into the quad, set the timer on his watch, and took off across campus. 30 minutes later, he was breathing heavily as he finished his 3rd mile jogging along the forested path that cut through Horace Grove. He was feeling good and decided to push himself for an extra mile. It turned out to be a bad idea. As he rounded a turn halfway through his 4th mile, he felt a tweak in his hamstring and slowed his pace. A small clearing was just up ahead, and he limped gingerly into it and bent over to stretch. Touching his hands to the ground, he noticed something shine through the leaves in the forested area next to the running path. A closer look revealed a silver ring with a green gem that appeared to be perched on top of leaves. He leaned farther and attempted to pinch the ring out of the leaves. His first attempt failed when his fingers slipped free from the stone, emerald or peridot. In preparation for a second attempt, He brushed the leaves away before noticing that the ring was still set on a finger, the hand covered by leaves. He stumbled backward until his perspective was able to take in the fact that the hand, bleach white and overstuffed, led to a wrist and a forearm. He struggled to pull his phone from his pocket. Wow! An hour later, police cruisers blocked a running path, their lights blinking. The coroner's van had backed into the clearing and was parked at an angle with the back doors open. Yellow crime scene tape roped off the area while a crime scene photographer snapped photos of the body. A detective stood waiting in the background. The coroner waited next to her. After everything was documented, the detective approached the body and got her first look. The victim was covered in leaves, as if her killer had haphazardly attempted to hide her body. The skin on the girl's face was bone white and contrasted stiffly with the dark strands of hair that lay across her cheek. Female victim, the detective said to the coroner, crouching next to the body and brushing the dead girl's hair to the side. Ligature wounds to the neck. The coroner crouched as well. He touched the dead girl's neck with his gloved hands. Looks like it was done with a thin length of rope, maybe 3/8 of an inch, he said. It'll take measurements when I get the body back to the morgue. I'll likely recover fibers to help identify what type of rope was used. The detective brushed the leaves off the rest of the girl's body. Shit, she said, when she saw that the victim was naked from the waist down. She was probably raped. Have to assume, the coroner said. But we'll know for sure once I start my exam. We're gonna need the parents to come down to make an ID. Neither the detective nor the coroner mentioned the victim's name. They didn't have to. It was obvious to both that they were looking at Laura McAllister. Chapter 45. Washington, D.C., Saturday, April 29th, 2023, 9:20 a.m. Alex had pushed for a coffee house but had been overruled, and since she was requesting the meeting and sniffing for details, she had no room to negotiate on the location. After her visit to the School of Journalism's recording studio, Alex had spent the previous evening listening to and taking copious notes on Laura McAllister's explosive episode. She'd come across a lot of information and still had more work to do. But despite the demands of the Matthew Claymore case, she had been unable to get Byron Zell out of her mind since reading about his death. She was worried, and despite Garrett's warning to stay away from the situation, Alex couldn't help herself. Benjamin's Tavern was a cop bar hidden in the basement level of a building in Truxton Circle, and frequented by law enforcement of all kinds, from beat cops to campus security, transit cops to detectives, and everything in between. To accommodate the schedules of Washington, D.C.'s finest, Benjamin's kept odd hours, like an airport bar that served stiff drinks to jet-lagged customers at 8:00 a.m. Benjamin saw a steady stream of customers all through the night, and into the morning hours as tired cops finished their shifts and looked for a place to unwind. Hank Donovan was a 50-something divorced detective who drank too much. The drinking aside, though, he was a useful source of information. Alex had a working relationship with Hank that, over the years, had produced a lot of give and take. As a Washington, D.C. detective, Hank Donovan had access to information that was occasionally useful to Alex, depending on which Lancaster and Jordan case she was working. And Alex, as an off-the-books investigator, who had worked in the underbelly of legal investigation for nearly a decade, and was still close to a dozen or so shady friends from Allegheny, many of whom had graduated from juvenile offenses to more sophisticated forms of crime, had her fair share of street connections that were sometimes useful to Hank's investigations. Alex had met Hank years ago through Buck Jordan, and since both men walked a fine line of functioning alcoholics, Alex was not surprised to see Buck and Hank bellied up to the bar when she walked into Benjamin's. It looked like they'd been there for quite some time. Newton's first law popped into Alex's thoughts when she looked at the two men, An object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. The law of inertia had been forever imprinted on her psyche, ever since she'd studied for a physics test on the night her family was killed. From time to time, and out of the blue, Newton's laws became applicably apparent. This morning, she knew it would take quite an unbalanced force to move these two from the bar. "Boys," Alex said when she walked over. "Am I late?" Buck looked at her with bloodshot eyes glassed over from too much bourbon. "Not at all," he said. "Hank and I were catching up. We haven't seen each other for a while?" "Good to see you, Hank," Alex said. The detective lifted his glass to her. "Alex, it's been a while. What can I get you?" the bartender asked. Alex looked around the somewhat crowded bar, amazed that so many people were drinking at this time of morning. "You don't by chance serve slow-poured Americanos, do you?" The bartender shook her head and smiled. "Just beer and liquor. 24/7. I'll have a water, thanks." "I'll have another Jameson." Hank pushed his glass to the end of the bar. "You on the wagon again, Alex?" "Was never off, Hank. And it's not even 9:30 in the morning. I just finished an overnight." "Maybe a diner for breakfast and coffee might have been a better idea." "I'd be up the rest of the day if I started drinking coffee at the end of my shift. I need a couple of Jamesons to put me to sleep and get me ready for tonight." "Fair enough. Just answer a few questions for us before you doze off." "Fire away." "Byron Zell," Buck said. "Tell us what you know." "Not much," Hank said. "But more than nothing," Alex said, "which is what we know." "Why are you two so curious about a pedo who got knocked off?" Alex was curious for a number of reasons, not the least of which was that she had recently been inside the man's apartment. An apartment that was now a crime scene, every inch of which was being dusted for prints and combed for fibers. She'd been careful during her rogue operation, but only to a point. Her barometer had been outwitting a wealthy businessman who would want to figure out how someone had gotten into his computer to send an errant email. The bar she had set was low, and hadn't included outsmarting CI teams or fingerprint experts or forensic scientists. Her worry, ever since reading the news about Byron Zell, was that she had sloppily left a print behind. Although Alex Armstrong would not show up in any database, Alexandra Quinlan would. Somewhere in the dusty corners of the National Fingerprint Database were the prints Alex had provided as a 17-year-old girl when she was arrested for the murder of her family. What a field day the press would have if Alexandra Quinlan's fingerprints were found in the apartment of a man who was shot dead. Good Lord, the mess that would cause. Byron Zell was a client at Lancaster and Jordan, Alex said. Buck and I had briefly been assigned to his case. Lancaster and Jordan was repping him on the pedo charges? Hell no, Buck said with a force that accentuated the slur to his words. We don't defend perverts. Alex looked at Buck. She was fashionably late for the 9:00 a.m. meeting, but was sure Buck had been there long earlier than that. Hank Donovan had an excuse for drinking so early in the morning. He'd just finished a night shift. Buck had no such pretext. We don't take clients like that, Alex said. As Buck so eloquently stated. Perverts, Buck said again. He gets it, Buck. Lancaster and Jordan doesn't represent pedophiles. Alex put her hand on Buck's shoulder and lowered her voice. You okay? Buck nodded and went back to his bourbon. Over the years, Alex had grown accustomed to the dark valleys Buck Jordan occasionally descended into. Certain subjects seemed to pull him into an abyss of anger and depression. The episodes were always fueled by alcohol. She knew that Buck was concerned about her having been in Byron Zell's apartment, and that he was currently teetering on the edge of a meltdown because he considered Alex his responsibility. At least as far as her work at Lancaster and Jordan was concerned. Alex looked back at Hank. Zell came looking for representation against embezzlement charges. I was looking into his finances. A kitty predator and a thief. Lancaster and Jordan is attracting quite the clientele these days. We didn't know about the pedo stuff when we agreed to rep him, Hank, and we cut ties as soon as we learned about it. Immediately, Buck added. If you look closely, Alex said, you'll see that it was Garrett Lancaster who originally brought the child pornography to the police. Really? How'd that come about? Alex said, lifting her glass and taking a sip of water. She and Buck stole a glance at each other. Zell accidentally sent the dirty pictures to Garrett Lancaster. Accidentally. The pictures were included in a batch of financial documents he sent to Lancaster and Jordan. Apparently, the guy hid his porn in thin financial files on his computer, and Lancaster turned him in. Garrett turned over the illegal files to the police. That's all I know about it. So we've got a thief, a child predator, and an idiot. Well, Alex said, for what it's worth, it looks like he wasn't embezzling funds from his company. Gee, let's throw the guy a parade. Tell us what you know about the homicide, Hank, Buck said. There's not much to tell. Our guys got called to the scene by one of Zell's relatives, a niece, I think. She'd been unable to get a hold of him for a couple of days, so she convinced the super to let her into Zell's apartment to check on him. Found him dead in the kitchen. 2 gunshot wounds, one to the face, one to the chest. Uniforms arrived, roped the place off. Crime scene folks documented everything. Then my guys got there. And what, Buck? You want a blow-by-blow? Just an overview, Buck said. We need to know what you found in the guy's apartment. They said the guy died quickly. The shot to the face was first and would have killed him by itself, but the second through the heart made sure of it. Gun was a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson. Forensic guys are looking to trace it, but no hits yet. That's about it so far. Buck looked at Alex and nodded before taking a sip of whiskey. Oh, there was something interesting. The CI guys found kiddie porn around the guy, so we're tracking that for now. Trying to ID the kids in the pictures to see if maybe it was an angry parent of one of the kids. Alex looked at Hank, her eyelids squinted and her head tilted in a curious posture. There were pictures around the body, she asked. Hank nodded. Initial angle is that whoever pulled the trigger placed the photos around the body as sort of an explanation for the killing. The photos were printed from Zell's computer. The forensic guys found the images on his hard drive. The geeks are looking now. New computer, incidentally. His old one had been confiscated, so it looks like he was at it again. Alex's heart began to pound as beads of sweat sprouted on her forehead. She thought about her evidence board, on which she had fruitlessly worked over the years, pinning any fringe detail to the board, believing that someday the details would make sense and lead to her family's killer. It had been years, though, since she'd found anything meaningful. Years since she'd made her last inch of progress. But now, 10 years after her family had been killed, she'd stumbled across Byron Zell, whose murder looked vaguely similar to her parents'. There were thousands of shooting homicides each year in the United States, so Alex couldn't count that as a similarity. But the photos definitely were. Her family's killer had also placed photos around her parents' bodies. Photos of 3 women thought to be victims of sexual abuse and trafficking. You okay? Hank asked. You're white as a ghost. Christ, kid, Buck said. Don't faint on me. Have a sip of your water. Now it was Buck who lowered his voice. You got nothing to worry about. If they were going to find anything to link you to that apartment, I'd have found it by now. Alex closed her eyes and worked to regain her composure. Her presence inside Byron Zell's apartment was the farthest thing from her mind. You two want to tell me what's going on? Hank asked. Alex shook her head. Any luck tracking the kids in the photos? No, and there won't be. Most of those kids are in the system and untraceable. The sex trafficking world is sad, but it's where 99% of that stuff comes from. It won't lead anywhere. but my guys will chase it anyway. They'll put a search through the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, but they won't get any hits. Hank continued his suspicious inspection of Alex's reaction before taking a sip of whiskey. So that's about all I've got for you guys. The apartment was clean, no useful prints, a bunch of Zells and a few strays, but none that matched anyone in our database. Buck looked over and winked at her. Alex should have sunk her shoulders a bit, relieved to hear that she hadn't left any prints behind, but the tension stayed in her body. The photos left by Byron Zell's body had hit too close to home. "You're freaking me out, kid," Hank said. "You sure you don't want a real drink? Something with some punch behind it?" Alex blinked, pulling herself back from the hypothetical that ran through her mind. The idea that Byron Zell's crime scene was chillingly similar to her family's. "She's just freaked out by the situation," Buck said. "We were investigating this guy, and now he's dead. A dead pedophile is not a bad thing. It's just the connection to Lancaster and Jordan that had us curious. Keep us updated if something comes up or you get any leads, will you? I know Garrett Lancaster will be interested too." "You bet," Hank said. "Now don't either of you forget to pick up the phone next time I call asking for a favor." "Will do," Buck said. Alex nodded and offered a weak smile as Buck dropped money onto the bar. "I'm going to get Alex home. Thanks for the information, Hank." Alex turned to leave, her mind pulling her back to the night her family was killed. It was a place she had managed well over the last 10 years, allowing the memories into her consciousness only when she wanted them there. But as Buck walked her out of the bar, she was deluged with uncontrolled thoughts and images from that night, and a wild notion that she was closer to the truth than she understood. Chapter 46. Washington, D.C., Saturday, April 29th, 2023, 9:50 a.m. Annette Packard sat at the end of the bar at Benjamin's Tavern. Although she no longer frequented the place, she knew it existed. The place was not just for cops. Benjamin's was popular with field agents, and Annette had years ago been a regular at the tavern. It had been her attempt to fit in before she realized that chasing bad guys for the FBI was not her calling, and that she was better suited digging through politicians' lives, although at times the two felt like one and the same. She waited a couple of minutes after she saw the woman leave before she raised her hand and spoke. "Hank Donovan?" She saw her old friend turn his head at the sound of his name. She slid off her stool and walked over, offering a huge smile as if the encounter were due to chance, and not dumb luck, that the woman Annette had been following since the previous morning had ended up sitting at a bar next to an old cop friend of hers. "Annette? Get out of here," Hank said, standing to embrace her in a bear hug. "What are you doing here? I thought you were off to greener pastures." "No, I've been back in D.C. for a few years. I just travel all the time, so it feels like I'm never here." Annette and Hank had been Washington, D.C., beat cops a lifetime ago. "What have you been up to all these years?" Annette asked. "You're in a suit and tie. Don't tell me they made you detective." Hank smiled. "Head of homicide. Wow, Hank. Well done." "Thanks. And you? You're still with the Bureau? 20 years this June, Toto." "A lifer, huh?" Annette smiled. "Feels that way." "They still have you doing surveillance work?" "Sort of. They've got me vetting politicians, if you can believe that." "I can," Hank said. "I've actually heard that you're doing a great job and that your services are in high demand." "They keep me busy and keep paying me, so I must be doing something right." Hank looked at his watch. "They don't have you working third shift, do they?" "No," Annette said. "I was meeting a contact. He chose the place. I obliged." Hank tapped his watch, and Annette recognized the embarrassment on his face. "They've got me on overnight, so my day is winding down. That's the only reason I'm drinking whiskey at this hour." I get it, Hank. I know the hours can be brutal. Hey, just out of curiosity, who was the woman you were just talking with? Hank pointed at the empty stool next to him. Alex's empty glass, still resting on a square coaster on the bar. Oh, that was a legal investigator I sometimes work with. We help each other on cases when we can. Her name's Alex Armstrong, works for Lancaster and Jordan, a big firm here in DC. We were just exchanging information on a case. And I'm divorced, by the way, in case you're worried you caught me in an illicit affair. You've gotten paranoid in your old age. Probably so. Hank smiled again. Annette Packard. Man, it's been years. I know it's early, so I won't ask if I can buy you a drink. But you want to grab breakfast? I wish I could, Hank, but I'm in the middle of a case right now and I'm up to my neck. Can I take a rain check? Of course. Thanks for flagging me down. It was good seeing you. You too, Hank. Hank checked his watch again. I'd better hit the road myself. But let me grab your number so I can hold you to that rain check. They exchanged contact information and both turned to leave, Annette allowing Hank to walk in front of her. In one quick motion, she reached to the bar and retrieved Alex Armstrong's empty glass, then slipped it into her bag before anyone noticed. If she was going to tap the woman for information about Larry Chadwick and his son, Annette needed to run a background check on the woman to make sure there were no red flags. Typical protocol before enlisting someone as a source in one of her vets. Chapter 47. Washington, D.C., Saturday, April 29th, 2023, 10:30 a.m. Alex's mind was spinning as she entered her condo. The idea that Byron Zell's killer had dropped photos of child pornography around his body had conjured up the images of her parents' bedroom in Macintosh. Although Garrett had never shared the crime scene photos with Alex, despite that he had access to them when he was fighting for her freedom in the weeks after she was arrested, Alex had still managed to see them. They were leaked by the Macintosh Police Department in a misguided attempt to win favor with the public, as if seeing the horror that took place inside her parents' bedroom would prove to the public at large that Alex was a killer. She'd first seen the photos when a group of kids at Allegheny printed them off the internet and pinned them to the walls of Alex's room while she was in a group therapy session. The images continued to show up throughout her time in juvenile detention. In her room, in the bathroom stall, in the recreational area, in envelopes stuffed into her mailbox. Alex had no choice then. She was forced by the vile kids who made up the population at Allegheny to look at the images from the night her family was killed. It was after her release that viewing them became voluntary. She had dedicated hours and hours of therapy to organizing and compartmentalizing those images and the thoughts they brought with them, trying to work out what made sense and what was a figment of her imagination. There was a period of time during the dark days when Alex had even allowed herself to believe what everyone around her, from the detectives who interrogated her, to the reporters who wrote about her, to the true crime fanatics who stalked her, was suggesting that she had pulled the trigger that night, and that her mind had somehow erased it from memory and replaced the truth with a fantasy of her escaping the night by hiding behind the grandfather clock in the hallway. Alex had traveled so far down that rabbit hole that some distant part of her mind still considered it a possibility. Although she had not been able to bring herself to fully admit her failure, the fact that she had searched for a decade without finding an alternate theory added to the smoke-filled corner of her mind where that hazy theory resided. But now she had something. Now she had a link to another homicide. It wasn't much. The photos left around Byron Zell's body. But it was more than she'd had the day before. It was the first clue she'd come across since returning from Cambridge years ago. And it was just enough to push the door to that hazy part of her mind closed a little farther. Alex had always known that the pictures of the girls left on her parents' bed were the key to figuring out the truth about that night. The pictures were of 3 women who had worked for Roland Glazer, the business tycoon who had been arrested on child sex trafficking charges, and who had hung himself in his jail cell the night before his trial was to start. The knowledge that whoever killed Byron Zell had also dropped photos by his body had Alex's mind churning in a redundant loop from which she could not escape. Could the slaughter of her family be linked in some way to Byron Zell? She hurried to the dining room where she pushed the accordion divider to the side and stood in front of her evidence board. She looked at the photos of the 3 women who were still missing to this day. It was widely suspected. Alex had learned from her deep dive into the Roland Glazer case that Glazer had killed the women in order to protect his secrets. Alex moved her gaze from the women to the photos of her parents. Then she stared at the photo of the Sparhafen Bank in Zurich and the statement for the numbered account she found hidden in her attic. An account that had been opened by Roland Glazer. There was a connection there that she still couldn't understand. Alex turned from her board and ran to the kitchen. She grabbed the Washington Times article that covered Byron Zell's death. Foregoing scissors, she tore the article from the newspaper, pinned it to her board, and allowed her gaze to jump from her parents to Roland Glazer to the bank account statement to the 3 women, and, finally, to Byron Zell. She stared for 20 minutes, searching for understanding that would not come. Only when her doorbell rang did Alex finally give up. She turned from the board and walked to the kitchen, where she activated the intercom. Hello? Alex, it's Jacqueline. We have a problem. Alex was used to Garrett making house calls. Their relationship was such that it was not unusual for Garrett to stop by unannounced. Sometimes it was work-related, but oftentimes it was with Donna, and for no other purpose than a visit. For Jacqueline Jordan to make an appearance meant something was happening in the Matthew Claymore case. Alex buzzed her up and waited with her door open until the elevator arrived. When it did, Jacqueline emerged. Sorry to barge in on a Saturday, Jacqueline said as she exited the elevator and walked up the hallway. No worries, Alex said. What's going on? They found Laura McAllister's body early this morning. Oh God, that's awful. Jacqueline walked into Alex's apartment. I'm only getting early details. Her body was found by a professor on a running trail near campus. My source at the police department said early indications are that she was raped and strangled. Alex put her hands to her face but didn't speak. Matthew Claymore's parents just called me. The police took Matthew in for questioning. On what grounds? Detectives discovered a backpack near Laura's body that they've linked to Matthew. Linked how? They're saying it's his backpack. Alex swallowed hard. Now what? If it's true, and early indications say it is, then the backpack ties Matthew to the scene and we've got a major problem. Jacqueline, I don't believe it. I spent a lot of time with Matthew this past week. He's not a killer. Matthew provided DNA samples when we had our interview yesterday, so we'll know soon enough. Was there DNA on Laura's body? My source didn't know, but he said it was a messy crime scene. If Matthew's DNA is absent from the scene, that should take the suspicion off of him. Backpack or not. If his DNA shows up on her body, then we'll have some decisions to make. But the backpack found at the scene is my first priority. I'm on my way to the precinct to meet with him now, but before I do, I wanted to see if you turned up anything since yesterday morning. Yes, a lot, Alex said, pointing to the couch. I know just about everything about Laura's story. Sit down and I'll tell you. Can I get you something to drink? Jacqueline sat on the couch. Ice water, please. Alex headed to the kitchen and prepared a glass of ice water. She handed it to Jacqueline as she sat across from her boss. As she did, Alex became awkwardly aware that her evidence board was in full view. She'd forgotten to pull the accordion divider closed, and now the standing corkboard easel, littered with photos of her parents, newspaper articles, and post-it notes, was on display for Jacqueline to see. Alex stood and pulled the divider closed. Sorry, just a pet project of mine, Alex said. I saw a photo of your parents, Jacqueline said. Alex smiled. I'm sure Garrett's mentioned it to you. Despite the crisis unfolding with Lancaster and Jordan's newest client, Alex saw Jacqueline's eyes take on a softer demeanor. Although Jacqueline had played only a supporting role years ago during Alex's defamation case against the state of Virginia, she had been Garrett's right hand in his fight to convince a judge to drop the charges against Alex and spring her from Allegheny. Alex passed, and the case Garrett and Jacqueline had won for her was a never-mentioned event at Lancaster and Jordan, but would remain a time in history when all three had become inextricably linked to one another. Jacqueline shook her head. He hasn't. Garrett's silence about her board was more proof that he was the most honorable man Alex knew. If there were anyone Garrett would share the details of Alex's lifelong obsession with, it was Jacqueline. "It's just this thing I do," Alex said. "Whenever I find new details about my family's case, I pin them to the board." Alex shrugged. "I know it sounds stupid." Jacqueline squinted her eyes. "Not at all, and don't let anyone tell you it is. If it's important to you, it's important. Period." Alex smiled. "Thanks, Jacqueline." Jacqueline pointed to where Alex's board was now hidden by the divider. "I don't mean to pry, but did I see Byron Zell's photo?" Alex shook her head. "You did. But I don't know. It's just this strange thing I found." "Want to tell me about it?" Alex smiled. "Not really." Jacqueline returned the smile. "Let's get to work?" "Yes." Alex took a deep breath. "Okay, so Laura McAllister's story was going to cover alleged rapes committed by members of the Delta Chi fraternity. Although only one incident of sexual assault was reported to the police, Laura had uncovered several other victims who were willing to speak about their ordeal. Nowhere in Laura's story was Matthew Claymore mentioned. But what you'll be most interested in is that Laura uncovered strong evidence that the girl who filed the police report believed that Duncan Chadwick raped her. Larry Chadwick's son? Yes, that's why they created such a spectacle with the press conference that essentially broke the scandal. Rather than allowing Laura to drop her story, they tried to defuse things by getting out in front of it. Exactly. And it goes without saying that Judge Chadwick had a lot to lose if a story about rape that involves his son went mainstream. So we have an angle there, and that's what you told me to find. We have someone with motive to keep Laura's story quiet. Accusing a sitting judge about to be nominated to the Supreme Court is risky. Not Judge Chadwick, but his son. Take me through your theory, Jacqueline said. My information comes from getting my hands on Laura's story. I listened to the episode she was going to drop. Here's what I know. A girl was raped at a Delta Chi party after she drank punch spiked with the date rape drug dubbed Liquid G. She took all the correct measures, went to the hospital, had a rape kit performed on her, and filed a police report. There's proof that she was at the fraternity party that night with Duncan Chadwick. A friend of hers has photos of the two of them together. Laura McAllister got tipped off about the rape through an email and started investigating. She found witnesses who said they saw Duncan and the girl together that night. The friend, a girl named Ashley Holmes, went to another Delta Chi party 2 weeks after the rape and got a drink from the bar, which she smuggled out of the party. She and Laura had it tested to confirm that Liquid G was present. Laura started to compile all of this evidence for her story, including the ways the university was working to keep the details quiet. But then bits of the story started to leak. Duncan heard that he was about to be named in the scandal. The following day, the Chadwicks held a press conference where Duncan Chadwick played the role of a concerned and outraged classmate, rescinded his Delta Chi membership, and promised to work with the police in any way possible. Jacqueline nodded her head. Damn fine investigative work, Alex. Well done. Jacqueline stood. Can you put all the details together in a brief for me, with names of sources? I'll get right on it. I'm heading to see Matthew now. He knows enough not to say a word until I'm there. And if they don't have something more substantial than a backpack, they're not going to be able to keep him detained. I've got a source inside the Washington, D.C. Detective Bureau. I can reach out to see how credible the backpack angle is." "Perfect. Do that," Jacqueline said. "And I'll keep you posted if I learn anything new on my end. Police are being tight-lipped at the moment, but they'll have no choice but to tell me everything if they hope to keep Matthew in custody. We'll talk soon." With a wave of her hand, Jacqueline was through the door and gone. Alex stood alone in her condo. Along with the silence came a sense of hopelessness. Despite the pressing matters of the Matthew Claymore case, Alex walked into the dining room, pulled the divider to the side, and stood in front of her board. Jacqueline's words were kind, but Alex had seen the sorrow in her boss's eyes when Jacqueline realized that, 10 years after the murder of her family, Alex was still looking for answers that would likely never come. Her efforts felt suddenly futile, and Alex wondered how long she could go before she admitted to herself that she'd reached a dead end years ago, and that no matter how skilled a legal investigator she was, her talents fell far short of being able to discover any trail that might lead to her family's killer. Chapter 48. Washington, D.C., Saturday, April 29th, 2023, 11:35 a.m. Claustrophobia descended over Alex's condo after her meeting with Jacqueline, so she headed to a coffee shop on the corner, the perfect cup. She wouldn't agree that their Americanos were perfect, but the coffee house was the best she'd found in the area. Syrupy drinks only peripherally related to coffee were written in marshmallow letters on a chalkboard on the wall behind the bar. Alex ordered a slow-poured Americano, found a seat at a tall table for two, and pulled out her phone. She started writing a text to Hank Donovan. It had been a couple of hours since she'd left the detective bellied up to the bar at Benjamin's, and one of two things had likely happened since then. Hank had continued to order drinks, and was still at the bar and drunk as a skunk, or he was asleep. At home, both situations meant she was unlikely to hear from him anytime soon. And the fact that Laura McAllister's body had been discovered early that morning meant Hank would be oblivious to the details. His shift had ended by then, and he'd count himself lucky that the call had gone to another detective. Still, Hank was her only contact inside the Washington PD, and even if he wasn't working the Laura McAllister case, he'd have access to it. It was at least worth a text message to find out. She pressed send just as someone sat down across from her. Alex looked up from her phone. "Hi," the woman said. Alex spoke with a wrinkled brow. "Can I help you?" "Maybe. My name's Annette Packard. I work for the FBI." Alex watched the woman reach into her blazer and remove her identification. When she did, Alex noticed the shoulder strap, holster, and gun tucked under her left armpit. The woman laid her credentials on the table. "I think you and I are after the same thing. At least that's what I've surmised after watching you run all over campus yesterday." Alex squinted her eyes. "The FBI?" "Sorry," Annette said. "That always comes off as intimidating when I say it without context. I work for a surveillance branch of the FBI, and my latest client is Lawrence P. Chadwick, Duncan Chadwick's father." Alex chose her words carefully. Why is the FBI interested in Lawrence Chadwick? Not interested so much as forced to be curious. When someone runs for public office or, say, is about to be tapped for a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court, they have to undergo security clearance type background checks. That's what I do. Alex lifted her chin, staring at the bulge under the woman's left arm. "And you need a gun to do that?" "Definitely not," Annette said, pulling her blazer closed to conceal the holster and the gun it held. "I hate this thing, but the Bureau requires agents to carry firearms at all times, so I'm stuck with it. And I should clarify what I mean when I say background checks. I vet politicians to make sure they don't have skeletons hiding in their closets, and I've been involved with the Chadwick family for a number of weeks now. I'm sure you've heard that Larry Chadwick's name has been floated as the president's next Supreme Court nominee. I've been tasked with making sure the judge has no secrets to hide. Everything was checking out splendidly. In fact, I was about to put my seal of approval on him I was this close to reporting back to the president that Larry Chadwick and his family were clean as a whistle. But then I started hearing rumors about Larry's son, Duncan, and his fraternity's involvement in rape on McCormack University's campus. A story like that could be damaging if it was credibly linked to the judge. And if the rumors are true that Duncan Chadwick was directly involved in sexual assault, well, that would be a game changer. So I started my due diligence, rolled up my sleeves and started looking for answers. Just as I started digging, Laura McAllister disappeared. You can imagine the position that put me in, especially because my boss needs to name a nominee soon. There's a lot of pressure to get the confirmation process started and over with before next year's election cycle heats up. So I've got a big mess on my hands. Alex raised her eyebrows. The mess is bigger than you think, she said. Laura McAllister's body was found early this morning. Someone strangled her and dumped her in the woods. Annette sat back in her chair. Well, shit. That definitely complicates things. Alex heard genuine surprise in the woman's voice. So why are you talking to me? Alex asked. Annette paused before she spoke. I saw you break into Laura McAllister's apartment, Annette finally said. You made impressive work of that lock. Alex's breath caught in her throat, preventing her from responding even if she had been clever enough to think of something to say. Annette shook her head. Don't worry, my arresting bad guys days ended decades ago when I left the police department. I chase information these days, not criminals. And the information I have tells me that you're an investigator for a law firm named Lancaster and Jordan, and that you're poking around McCormack University because your firm represents Matthew Claymore, who was dating Laura McAllister. Matthew is likely a person of interest. Boyfriends of missing, and now dead, girls usually are. So, you want something from me? Is that what this is? Yes, I need to know what you found out about Laura McAllister's story, and whether Duncan Chadwick was involved in any way. And what? I either help you or you turn me in for breaking into Laura's apartment? This is like a little extortion plot. No, I think you're misunderstanding why I brought up the fact that you broke into a dead girl's apartment to get information. I don't look down on it. I admire it. I wish I could break the rules when I'm digging for information, but I have the federal government constantly breathing down my neck. I have to keep my snooping strictly by the book. I can't be as brazen as you. I'm forced to be more subtle. Let me give you an example. After I saw you go to Laura McAllister's apartment, I figured you were working an angle on a case that's tied directly to my vetting of Larry Chadwick. So I followed you. I was at Benjamin's Tavern when you met with Hank Donovan, who happens to be an old colleague of mine from back in the day. He told me you were an investigator for a big firm. It was then that I knew I might need to know what you know, and that I might be able to use you as a source. You see, there's a loophole there. I, personally, can't break any laws to obtain information, but I can source that information to others who are more liberated in their information-gathering skills. If you agree to help me, you'd become a source of information. And when I recruit a source for information, I need to dot my I's and cross my T's to make sure I'm not getting in bed with a felon, or an otherwise unsavory soul, who could later be deemed unreliable. So I took your glass off the bar and ran the prints. Alex sat back in her seat and folded her hands on the table. It was a poor attempt to hide her angst, and she was sure Annette Packard knew she had Alex sweating. To my surprise, those prints came back not belonging to Alex Armstrong of Lancaster and Jordan, but to a woman named Alexandra Quinlan. There's not much out there in the Ethernet about Alex Armstrong. But man, type the name Alexandra Quinlan into a search engine and your computer damn near blows up. Alex calmly reached into her purse and removed a tube of bright orange lipstick. She applied it to her lips and puckered when she was finished. It was all she could do to stop her hands from shaking. I don't mean to intimidate you, Annette said. Really? You ambush me at a coffee shop, place an FBI badge on the table, make sure I see that you're carrying a gun, and then tell me that you secretly ran my prints. I think that's the very definition of intimidation. I'm just showing you how I operate, and I thought I could use the information I discovered about you to gain your trust. I don't care who you were. I only care what you know. You've been poking around McCormack University for a few days, and I'm interested in what you've learned. I have a vested interest to learn if Duncan Chadwick was part of the story Laura McAllister was going to tell. My job depends on me getting this right. I've got my crew on it, but it might take a while for them to get me the details. Details that you, with your ability to take liberties with how you investigate, might already have. So I'm here to make an offer. Alex returned the lipstick to her purse. She looked at Annette and nodded. I'm listening. I have the entire Justice Department at my fingertips. If you help me with this case and tell me what you've uncovered about the story Laura McAllister was working on, consider me in your debt. If you ever need help with a case, maybe you need something that will impress your boss at that big firm you work for, I'll use my credentials and my connections to get it done. A straight quid pro quo. You help me now, and I'll help you later when you need it. No questions asked. And the details about Laura McAllister's story, if I give them to you, what would you do with them? My only goal is to determine if anything about Laura McAllister and the story she was working on would be detrimental to Larry Chadwick's chances of getting through a Senate confirmation hearing. Alex paused. She felt that the pendulum of the conversation had finally swung back to give her some leverage. She nodded. It will, Alex said. Annette cocked her head. Ah, progress. Care to elaborate? Not yet. I need to do my own background check, and I'm not sure what I can share with you until I speak with my boss at Lancaster and Jordan. Sounds fair to me. Annette pushed a business card across the table. Call me when you're ready to talk. And as a courtesy, if you decide you have something to tell me about Larry Chadwick's son, the sooner the better for me. I'm on a deadline. The woman was up and out of the cafe before Alex had a chance to catch her breath or respond. Alex looked down at the card. Annette Packard, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation.